30. South Africa, 125.35 tons. South Africa is home to the largest single source of gold the world has ever seen, Witwatersrand Basin. Discovery of the basin's treasures prompted a gold rush in the late 1800s, which built the foundations of the city of Johannesburg. Today, South Africa's gold stocks sit at 125.35 tons. 29. Sweden, 125.72 tons. Sweden isn't an obvious choice as a major player in the gold market, but this Scandinavian country actually owns 125.72 tons of gold bars. It doesn't keep all its stocks on home ground, however. As well as Sweden's central bank, the Riksbank, the country's gold is also reportedly held within the Bank of England, the Bank of Canada, the Federal Reserve Bank in America, and the Swiss National Bank. 28. Brazil, 129.65 tons. In the second quarter of 2021, Brazil added a whopping 53.75 tons of gold to its reserves, almost doubling its hoard and pushing Mexico out of the top 30 countries. The purchase was reportedly Banco Central do Brasil's largest gold acquisition since at least December 2000. The move was unsurprising as the World Gold Council anticipated that central banks would be net buyers of gold last year, following the precious metal's stellar performance during the COVID-19 pandemic. In the third quarter, it followed up this purchase by buying a further 8.54 tons, meaning its reserves now outweigh those of South Africa and Sweden for the first time. 27. Singapore, 153.74 tons. Those looking for a secure place to store their gold often settle on Singapore, because the country has not been tarnished by any major corruption scandals, crime is low and so are taxes, plus the costs of gold storage here are incredibly competitive. The country itself has also got a substantial reserve of gold, 153.74 tons of the stuff to be precise, a significant increase of 26.34 tons since the second quarter of 2021. 26. Philippines, 157.01 tons. The Philippines is one of Asia's largest gold producers. Although mining is big business here, it's thought that much of its gold remains untapped. Desperately poor locals hoping to get lucky and literally strike gold even undertake dangerous dives in mud-filled swamp mines in search of the precious metal. The country has large reserves of gold already, however, with 157.01 tons currently under its ownership. 25. Venezuela, 161.22 tons. Venezuela was in the top 20 gold owners until a few years ago. But in a bid to reduce its vast debts and fend off economic crisis, it sold off about $1.7 billion, £1.2 billion worth of gold in early 2016. 24. Algeria, 173.56 tons. The North African country of Algeria has over 12 tons of gold more than Venezuela, with 173.56 tons of the gilded stuff. It also has a strong gold mining tradition, with gold thought to have been mined here on a small scale since pre-Roman times. The government has only recently taken steps to encourage commercial gold mining on a large scale, as it's thought that there is a great deal of wealth hidden beneath its soil. 23. Belgium, 227.4 tons. Belgium is holding on to 227.4 tons of gold. Most of this is thought to be held abroad, some in the Bank of England and some in the Bank of Canada. There had been talk of the country looking into repatriating its stocks back to Belgium, but it's thought that the transport and security costs involved in the move were prohibitive and Belgium was unsure where to store it if it did return to home soil. 22. Poland, 231.77 tons. Poland has recently been expanding its gold reserves in a bid to protect domestic currency values against the rising dollar, bringing them to their highest level in 35 years at 231.77 tons. 21. Thailand, 244.16 tons. Thailand added more than 90 tons of gold to its stockpile in the second quarter of 2021, bringing its total reserves to 244.16 tons and shifting the country 5 places up the gold ownership rankings. Thailand mines its own gold, and the Thai people place a high value on the precious metal. In fact, gold jewelry is arguably more popular in Southeast Asia as a whole than it is elsewhere in the world. 20. Austria, 279.99 tons. There is a big leap between 21st and 20th place, with Austria recorded as holding 279.99 tons of gold, over 35 tons more than Thailand. Much of its stock was held in the Bank of England, but the Austrian National Bank is said to be working on repatriating much of this back to Vienna so that at least half of Austrian gold is held at home. 19. Spain, 281.58 tons. Spain holds just over a ton more gold than Austria. Gold mining has been going on in Spain since pre-Christian times, and it was the Romans who turned it into a flourishing industry. There is now a renewed interest in Spanish gold, with a lot of prospector activity being carried out in the hope of being able to strike it lucky. It's unlikely to impact heavily on the country's gold reserves, however. 18. Lebanon, 286.83 tons. It may not be the most stable country in the world, but this small Middle Eastern land is rich in gold. Lebanon is currently holding on to 286.83 tons of gold, and it has the third largest gold reserves in the Middle East. Although Lebanon has a mining industry, gold is not one of its abundant natural resources. 17. United Kingdom, 310.29 tons. Many countries choose to store their gold in the heavily fortified Bank of England vault, the second largest in the world after the vault at the New York Federal Reserve. The UK has its fair share of gold reserves too, with 310.29 tons of the precious metal held in its name. 16. Saudi Arabia, 323.07 tons. The oil-rich country of Saudi Arabia has the second highest gold reserves in the Middle East, with 323.07 tons of the precious metal. As part of plans to diversify its economic base and rely less heavily on oil, Saudi Arabia is also committed to boosting its gold mining industry. Although overshadowed by oil, this is not a new endeavor, as archaeological studies show that gold began being mined in the country up to 5,000 years ago. 15. Portugal, 382.57 tons. Portugal has 382.57 tons of gold. However, the country has battled with economic instability, and there have been calls for it to sell off some of its gold reserves to reduce its national debt. Regulations make this easier said than done though, and for now Portugal is holding on to its precious asset. 14. Uzbekistan, 383.5 tons. A mineral-rich country, Uzbekistan has a wealth of resources including petroleum, natural gas, gold, silver, and uranium. As well as being a top producer of the precious metal, the country plans to continue increasing its gold reserves to 430 tons by 2024, a further increase of more than 70 tons. 13. Turkey, 392.80 tons. Turkey's gold reserves fell by more than 200 tons between 2017 and 2019, from 495.6 tons to 293.6 tons. The country then went on a buying spree due to concerns over its relationship with the US in a year of crisis for the nation's currency, the lira, and ended up with 716.3 tons of gold in the last quarter of 2020. Since then, it has led the global drive to sell off gold during the pandemic. In the second quarter of 2021, Turkey had 407.6 tons of the precious metal, and it since sold off another 13.9 tons. According to the latest figures, the country has 392.80 tons of gold left, less than 55% of its total reserves at the end of 2020. 12. Kazakhstan, 397.22 tons. Kazakhstan's national bank increased its gold reserves by more than 100 tons in the past 3 years, in a bid to reduce the country's reliance on the US dollar and neutralize currency risks. And in the months before the COVID-19 pandemic hit, it bought up more gold. Even at the beginning of 2021. 11. Taiwan, 423.63 tons. Despite being a small island off the coast of China, Taiwan is sitting on 423.63 tons of gold. In 2019, the country dipped into its gold reserves to produce coins to commemorate the upcoming inauguration of President Tsai Ing-wen as the chairperson of the Democratic Progressive Party. The central bank made a total of 10,000 gold coins and 50,000 silver coins to mark the occasion, which took place in May 2020. 10. Netherlands, 612.45 tons. The Netherlands takes the number 10 spot in the gold reserves rankings, with 612.45 tons of gold in its stocks. In October 2019, it was reported that the Dutch central bank would be transporting 14,000 gold bars, weighing a total of 175 tons, to a temporary location in Haarlem, before being permanently moved to the DNB Cash Center in Zeist. 9. India, 743.83 tons. There's a jump of over 100 tons from the Netherlands' stock of gold to that of India, which itself has increased by almost 150 tons in the past few years. The country also has high household reserves, particularly in the form of gold jewelry. 8. Japan, 845.97 tons. Japan holds 845.97 tons of gold in stock. In December 2020, 80 tons of gold used for minting coins were sold to a different arm of the government as the country explored ways to fund its enormous coronavirus stimulus package. The country also has its own veins of gold running through its land, which have been mined on a small scale for centuries. Recent exploratory gold searches have proved a success, and Japan is now looking to exploit those reserves further. 7. Switzerland, 1,040 tons. The gold stocks move into four figures now, with Switzerland holding 1,040 tons. The majority of this gold is held on home soil, but some of it is stored at the Bank of England and Bank of Canada. In 2014, there was a referendum to decide on whether the Swiss National Bank, SNB, should expand its gold reserves from 7% to 20%. The status quo prevailed, and 78% of voters were against the SNB increasing its share. 6. China, 1,948.31 tons. China has 1,948.31 tons of gold in its reserves. It is also the world's biggest gold producer, accounting for 12% of global mine production according to investment manager US Global Investors, and the local demand for gold has been boosted by the burgeoning wealth of its growing middle class. 5. Russia, 2,298.53 tons. Russia can't get enough of this precious metal, and has spent around $40 billion, £28.7 billion, over the past 5 years to boost its gold reserves, allowing it to overtake China in the rankings and reduce its reliance on the US dollar. Plus, it has a billion-dollar gold mining industry, which means this metal-rich country doesn't need to rely on imports either. Its gold reserves increased by 6.22 tons during the third quarter of 2021, the fifth largest increase in the world. 4. France, 2,436.35 tons. France has stockpiled 2,436.35 tons of gold, much of which was reportedly acquired during the 1950s and 1960s. It has increased its stocks by a modest 0.03 tons since the second quarter of 2021. Although some of its reserves are held abroad, most of this gold is said to be held in vaults under the Banque de France in Paris. A few hundred tons of French gold were sold off in the early part of this century, but stocks have remained stable since about 2009. 3. Italy, 2,451.84 tons. Italy holds just slightly more gold than France with 2,451.84 tons. Unlike most countries, where the gold reserves are owned by the state and managed by their central banks, Italy's gold is actually owned by the Banca d'Italia and held in vaults in Rome and at the Swiss National Bank, the Federal Reserve Bank in New York, and the Bank of England. The Italian government made headlines in February 2019 when it said that it would not sell a gram of the gold reserves to fill budget holes. 2. Germany, 3,359.09 tons. Germany is the second largest hoarder of gold in the world with 3,359.09 tons of it, a tiny decrease from 3,359.12 tons earlier in 2021. Concern over its gold falling under Soviet control during the Cold War led to the stockpile being spread around the world. It was thought to be divided between the Federal Reserve Bank in New York, the Bank of England, and the Banque de France. Between 2013 and 2017, at least half of this bounty was bought back home to Frankfurt. 1. USA, 8,133.47 tons. Unsurprisingly perhaps, the USA is the country with the most gold in the world, boasting a whopping 8,133.46 tons of gold bullion. That's nearly as much as Germany, Italy, and Russia combined. The majority of this gold is thought to be held in depositories across America, such as the United States Bullion Depository, better known around the globe as Fort Knox.